Today's short is being brought to you by Goya Foods. If it's Goya, it has to be good.
Your daily game plan for success. It's Sachs in the Morning. Steve Sachs.
Hi, Steve Sachs here with Sachs in the Morning. And can you believe it? We've hit August. Today is Monday, August the 1st. My, how we're flying by this year. Today's podcast is one about perspective. Yeah, this is a perspective podcast today. We're going to talk a little bit about, what our lives are like. And I want to give you a few examples of what some other people's lives have been like and some things that have happened in those lives. And recently I had broken my wrist, is actually down in Los Angeles. I was in the gym and I broke my wrist lifting weights. And it's too bad. I mean, I spent a couple days in my room not knowing what happened, but I was going through some pretty difficult pain. The throbbing sensation in my wrist got to be so much that I had to go to the hospital and check it out. They said, guess what? You have a broken wrist. So fine. So I got that taken care of. And then I thought about, I'm not going to sit here and go, woe is me, poor me. I broke my wrist, whatever. I started thinking about comparatively and putting things in perspective. And I'm a big reader of popular mechanics. And I read this article about some of these survival tactics that had to be put through. Some of these things were driven out of necessity for people to survive. And I thought, you know what? My broken wrist isn't really that bad. So I want to go through a couple of these with you, and maybe you can get some perspective on your life too. Maybe it can help you out. So let's get to number one. Here's the first one I wanted to talk to you about. Is a lady named Angela Hernandez. She was on her way driving down Highway 1 down in Southern California when her SUV ran off the road. She was dodging an animal, and this thing went off the road, and she went down a cliff, and she wound up in a rocky part of the beach. She had a brain hemorrhage, a fractured ribs, broken collarbone, ruptured blood vessels in both eyes, and a collapsed lung. But she did not die. Now, when she came to, water was lapping over her knees, and she broke the window with a multi-tool and crawled out of the window, and then she swam to the beach and passed out. So with all that physical damage, I mean, can you imagine the pain that somebody had to endure with that kind of a crash? When she came to, she had no shoes on, and she was really banged up, but she began walking to the shore for help. She had a hose from her car to collect dripping water from moss along the shore, and she walked for days. She could see cars passing by in the cliffs far away, but they couldn't see her or hear her screams. It wasn't until a couple of hikers were scouting down to the beach for fishing spots that they stumbled across her wrecked Jeep, and they scoured the beach until they found her crumpled up, sleeping on some rocks. They gave her water, called for help, and eventually rescuers got her and took her to the hospital for some help. But that kind of a damage that somebody had to go through is just amazing. The second one I want to tell you about is about Julian Kepcke. So on Christmas Eve in 1971, Julian Kepcke flew on Lanza Flight 508, which was struck by lightning. It began to disintegrate in midair, and Kepcke found herself still strapped to her seat 2 miles above the Peruvian rainforest. She was battered, she was bruised, her collarbone was broken, but she was alive. She was the only survivor of the flight, and now she found herself in the wilderness alone. Some candy was her only food, but she found a small stream. She waded down water in it, able to keep herself hydrated at the same time. The insects in the jungle stopped short of eating her alive, and maggots had infected her arm. But after 9 days, she was able to find an encampment. She gave herself rudimentary first aid, including pouring gasoline on the maggot infestation. A few hours later, lumber workers found her, giving her first aid and taking her to a more inhabited area where she was airlifted to a hospital. Now, to me, the sheer shock of being in a crash like this in a totally unfamiliar area and having the wherewithal to try to find some type of first aid just to keep yourself alive and give yourself a shot is absolutely amazing to me. And the last one that I wanted to mention to you was about a man named Harrison O'Keene. On May 28th, 2013, divers in the wreckage of the Jazcon 4 were attempting a triage of the vessel, which sunk 100 feet down off the coast of Nigeria after capsizing. What they didn't expect to find was a survivor. Harrison O'Keene was the ship's cook. He was in the latrine when the boat capsized and tried to reach an emergency exit hatch, but it failed. The boat began to fill with water, with O'Keen trapped inside. Eventually, he found himself trapped with a 4-foot square bubble of air. After 3 days, he had given up hope, then heard a knock. It was the hammer of the divers working on the surface of the ship. Eventually, diving gear was brought to him, and he was brought to a decompression chamber where he had to spend 2 days. He had been at depths that should have killed him in a situation that took the lives of everyone else on board. Unsurprisingly, he vowed to never go out to sea again. So when I think about these 3 extraordinary ways of people that had the innate instinct to survive in the worst possible situations where people would have given up hope, you know, there's something great about hope, and there's something great about putting things in perspective. I recently broke my wrist, and for a couple of days, there was a lot of throbbing pain. But then when I think about things like Angela Hernandez or Julian Kepcke or Harrison O'Keen, it makes me really put things in a different perspective. So in that light, I find myself gratified in the fact that I'm doing well, I'm fine, and I didn't have to face the turmoil and tragedy that some other people have had to face in their lives. And that's my short for today. If you like what you heard, give us a positive review, subscribe, and share. Also, remember that the Sax in the Morning swag is now available on my Instagram site. Go to saxinthemorning_podcast. You'll see it right there on the Instagram, and just hit the link. Everything's there: mugs, hats, tumblers, you name it. Take advantage of it. Today's short was brought to you by Goya Foods. If it's Goya, it has to be good.